Hey hope you all are doing well. We are going to round off our preliminary tour of the post-Core 2 and Banlist world by looking at the final major faction. We've covered the others, but we've saved the best for last indeed, because we're going to round it off with Jinteki. And in particular, we're going to look at a Tennin Fast Advanced deck. But before that, why is Jinteki by and large the best faction right now? Well, I'm sure all of you know, but let's do a recap. Jinteki has the best agenda suite. Whether you're, and this applies whether you're playing a fast deck or a slow deck, a prison deck or any archetype, net damage or scoring, you have an agenda suite you can count on because you have so many choices. Whether you want defensive agendas, offensive agendas, or in our case, if you want agendas that aid a fast advanced strategy. You also have the best defensive upgrade in the game. Marcus Batty has very few counters out there right now, with the loss of Rumor Mill on the runner side. You also have the best burst economy card in the game. With NBN losing Sweet Sweet, Celebrity Gift is the next best thing, giving you 3.5 credits per click. Pretty good. Finally, you have pretty decent ice. Not the best, I'd say HB has better ice, but not the worst either. You have some very nasty ice. DNA trackers are something that runners don't want to face check, and you have ice on the cheap rate, the low end range as well, that are significantly taxing, like Ike and Pup. This is a big deal. You also have Mirage. This is a very important point. While other factions are forking out 2 influence per pop for the Jackson replacements, you have Mirage in faction. This is a huge boost. The only thing you really don't have is End the Run. This is a big problem with Jinteki. But other than that, they basically have everything covered. All the basics are there. So let's move to Jinteki Fast Advance and our Tennin deck. Let's analyze the Tennin deck bit by bit, and then we'll put them together as a whole at the end of it. So first, we look at the ice. This is an anomaly in Fast Advance decks. You don't usually play that much ice in Fast Advance because typically in Fast Advance decks, you only need guard your centrals. You don't really need remote ice. Hence, you don't need to play that many ice. NEH Fast Advance, for example, got by with 14 ice, 15 ice at some point. We are doing the traditional 17 ice. This is important. Firstly, we are not a pure Fast Advance deck. With the presence of Clot and the likes of the Source, we cannot enact a pure Fast Advance strategy. That just doesn't fly. So we need to have a dual mode, something like that can go a bit slower, and hence we need to be able to set up a remote when the time calls for it. As such, we need the critical mass of ice so that we can protect our centrals while setting out our scoring remote. Speaking of protecting centrals, one thing you really want to do as Tennin is to block up all 3 centrals early. It's kind of the same as what you do against Criminal. Once you have ice on all 3 centrals and threaten nasty ice such as DNA Tracker, you will make it very hard for the runner to convince themselves to run to deny you your Tennin ability. And this way you can start chalking up advancement counters on all your ice. This is quite important. You'll also notice we spend 10 influence on the Weyland ice because we want our ice to have extra fangs, extra oomph when they have advancement counters on it. We don't just want them to be Trick of Light batteries. Speaking of Trick of Light batteries, we are also playing Priority Construction. Since we have advanceable ice, why not? Tricon is only 1 influence. It's starting to look like a Weyland deck, and indeed, why not really? Being 1 influence and such a good card, it really is a steal for your money. Or should I say steal for your influence. Back to the Trick of Light battery, Tricon serves as a powerful way to get a Trick of Light battery going. Unlike Mushin no Shin, where the runner can possibly run your Mushin card and trash it or steal it, they can't do the same to your advanced ice unless they're running Apocalypse. As such, having some Tricon to serve as a Trick of Light battery enabler is huge. Don't forget, you can use Priority Construction on non-advanceable ice. If you read the text on Tricon, it states that the ice does not need to be advanceable. You just place 3 counters on it, whether it's advanceable or not. Hence, it's a very good card for bluffing your Jinteki ice out, even though it's not a Colossus or a Firewall. The runner has to be afraid that it could be an over-advanced Hortum or a Morcellus or a Colossus, so they are less likely to run it, even though it might just be a lowly Mirage, for example. So very important. Also contributes to mass commercialization, which we are also running 3 of. This is the deck to run mass comm in because Tennin is advancing your ice everywhere. Now let's move on to upgrades. We are running Crisium Grid in this deck to round off our influence suite. So far we've spent 13 influence, the last 2 will be spent on Crisium Grid because the Crisium Grid Mirage combo serves to nullify most of the R&D and HQ pressure that most runners can apply. And this is pretty key. One easy way to lose is to get deep data mining to hell or to get hit by a legwork or a spy camera. Miraju and Crisium Grid in tandem takes care of all of that. It also synergizes with your ID ability. For those of you who are not that familiar, Crisium Grid causes successful runs on the server to not count as successful runs for the purposes of card abilities, and Tenin's ID is a card. So even if you make a so-called successful run on Crisium Grid, the Tenin ID ability still fires. And that is very important for chalking up those advancement counters so that you can use your Trick of Light. So here's the deck in its entirety. The only thing I really want to touch on here is the agenda suite. You'll notice that instead of playing the Medical Breakthrough, which is your typical go-to fast advanced Jinteki agenda, we are playing Nisei Mark II instead. Nisei is such a strong agenda, the ability to end the run at a moment's notice is unrivaled and has basically no counter on the runner side. This is why I like it, and I would rather have this ability than an agenda that's easily fast advanceable. Nisei Mark II is amazing, and yeah, if you are able to sneak it out in a remote, you can pretty easily score it in this deck. So this is the plan, and as you'll notice, this is basically a Weyland deck masquerading as a Tenin deck, because basically the only reason to be playing Jinteki here is for the ID ability. Tenin's ability enables so many things: Trick of Light, mass commercialization. That's why you want to play Jinteki. Otherwise, all the influence is spent on Weyland cards. Let's witness the ultimate partnership, Jinteki and Weyland, in action. Our game today is against Leela Patel, and this is a very bad matchup for me because Leela can bounce my Unrest Advanced Ice. That seems familiar. Seems like I've said this before. Weird sense of deja vu there. Anyway, this is one of those times where you're very, very happy that you included 17 ice in your deck, because my opening hand had 4 ice. I have a buffet of options to choose with regards to defending my centrals, so DNA Tracker immediately goes on HQ, and something good on R&D as well. And I immediately draw into all my money, so absolutely phenomenal start here. All 3 centrals iced, and hedge fund, IPO. Rich as heck. My opponent plays a gang sign. Okay, yep, this is indeed a mirror match. If you remembered my last video, I was playing Leela against Tenin. This is the exact opposite. I'm now going to be on the receiving end of that bloody gang sign. Well, I don't have a snare in this deck, so that plan's out. Gotta find some other way to win. But that way to win has arrived in my hand. It's a priority priority construction with a Colossus. So I have a very secure way to get a remote going, if not for the fact that Colossus doesn't end the run. So Prycon on Colossus doesn't look that good right now. I need to do something else first. I draw into my first agenda, Brain Trust. Well, I draw into my second agenda, Nisei Mark II. Okay, this is not good, but I have a plan for getting through this. So I'm going to Prycon the Firewall next turn. I couldn't do it this turn because it's a double. And my opponent suddenly fills my hand with Fisk Investment Seminar. Damn, I shouldn't have drawn. If my opponent's gonna draw for me, I should be clicking for credits instead, or advancing my ice. So here comes the very awkward turn where you have to get rid of the bunch of cards in your hand. I'm still probably gonna go through with Prycon into Firewall, and probably my last click is gonna be spent installing an ice on top of the Firewall. Or I could fast advance an agenda here. Given that I have one fast advance mechanism in the shipment from Tenin, I cannot fast advance this Nisei. So, whoops, I click on the wrong agenda. Let's take it back, do a take back. We are going to score the Brain Trust. That will leave us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards in hand, one of which is an agenda. So I feel okay about this score. I would like to score the Brain Trust now, because now that I have 2 agendas in hand, if I score it at a later turn, I will have fewer cards in my hand to pad out that Nisei Mark II, which increases the chances that my opponent gets my Nisei Mark II via gang sign. So this feels like a good turn to shipment from Tenin the Brain Trust. I'll score it, and my opponent gets a gang sign trigger. Mass commercialization was hit, so I'm safe. But
My opponent predictably bounces the R&D Ice. That is triple advance. Oh dear. What? Yeah, what a loss indeed. Not much can do about that. And I'm forced to discard here. So it's unfortunate that I had to lose my advance ice, but I'm not bummed about it at all because I have double priority construction in hand, so getting Trick of Light counters is going to be trivial. The bigger problem is with R&D open, my opponent starts sieging R&D and starts dismantling my board state. The Colossus of HQ goes, and R&D is wide open here. Maker's Eye, interesting. So I was running Hacktivist in my deck, but my opponent's leader decides to go for more influence for R&D pressure. Maker's Eye, very good include there. Now I feel like I'm gonna need money to res ice in case my opponent makes proper runs. So I play the Celeb Gift, taking care not to show the Nisei Mark II from my hand. And then I install Colossus on R&D. So my opponent knows the R&D ice is either Colossus or Firewall or some hidden ice that I didn't show them. They get an HQ interface down, and that really scares me. So now I desperately need to pump out this Nisei Mark II. But first, Prycon, Firewall followed by Colossus. This takes up my entire turn. I can't drop the Nisei in there. I would have loved to put the Nisei in there, and I could have if I played Firewall into Colossus into install Nisei, but that would leave me without Trick of Light counters. As my opponent plays a DDoS and goes in for a second Maker's Eye, they whiff this time, thankfully. So that's one DDoS and one Maker's Eye down. I'm very happy about that. And most importantly, my opponent misplayed here. They did not run HQ. On their DDoS turn, they had free access to HQ and archives. They chose not to run HQ, even with a HQ interface out. They would have almost certainly stolen my Nisei Mark II if they ran HQ, but instead they decided to spend their clicks installing Cast and Earthrise. So this is one of those incredibly niche situations where the Celeb Gift actually helped me out. By revealing my hand full of no agendas, my opponent was like, well, they probably don't have an agenda in hand since they showed me the hand earlier. I'm not going to waste my time running HQ. That was huge. This allowed me to get the Nisei in this remote uncontested. At the start of my turn, they did not run. I get a 10 in advancement. This allows me to score the Nisei Mark II without requiring the Trick of Light. So, yeah, never advance Nisei. This is one of the big advantages of playing Tenet Institute versus, say, Egg Infusion. With Egg Infusion, you are telegraphing every Nisei score because you have to single advance it beforehand. But here, a never advanced Nisei gets through easily. So, yep, I get the end of run counter, and my opponent gets a Logos trigger and an R&D bounce. So I kind of expected them to tutor up either Maker's Eye or same old thing with the Logos and go for an R&D dig, but nope, they just run normally. And oh no, this is not what I wanted to see at all. They stole an Obo Carter. That puts them on match point. This is bad. They're running again. I have to gamble here. Take my chances. Hope that's not an agenda. If it is, I've lost. Nope, not an agenda. I survive. But my opponent goes turtle. They have Armor Quad. They actually run a breaker. Wow. Okay. Not the biggest deal because I have Prycon Firewall ready to go. As long as I can secure a Prycon Firewall remote, my opponent can never get the strength required for Armor Quad to beat Firewall. Unless they're running Dean Lister, in which case, good for them. I do have a Nisei counter. I can end the run there. So, as I mentioned, Prycon Firewall is going to be my win con. Prycon the win con. Firewall goes on the remote, and I'm going to prepare to score the Obo Carter in my hand next turn. My opponent draws it for me with the Fisk Investment Seminar. Now, it's now or never. I'm going to find a way to score this Obo Carter now. That will win me the game. Can I do it? I analyze the board and make a note of all the ways in which I can lose. So, all I need to do is to single advance the Obo Carter here into the remote, because I can get 4 advancements in one turn with the Trick of Light in my hand. So install single advance. With my final click, I place the Kakugo on server 3. This is to guard against inside job and DDoS. I need the firewall to be active if my opponent decides to contest the remote. And yes, they had the next DDoS ready to go. So they're running R&D here. I hope it's not an agenda, but if it is, they've won anyway. I have to hedge my bets there. It wasn't. Good. I've more or less have this game under wraps. They run my remote, but they'll be stopped dead cold by the 8 strength firewall. Not this time, Toto. Alright, with their final click, I knew that no matter what, I was going to win the game. All I had to do is to end the run with Nisei Mark II and fast advance with Trick of Light to close out the game. That's another way to win against Dealer Gang Sign. Score your agendas as soon as you draw them. As uninteractive as Leela gang sign combos are, that match really made my heart race because I had a pretty decent draw, pretty good in fact, and I was racing to get those agendas out before my opponent could flood me any further with physical investment seminars and sieging my servers with DDoS and Maker's Eyes. The MVP of this match by far was the priority constructions. Without those precons, with just Tenant's ability alone, your ID is basically kind of blank, because as soon as you advance ice, once your opponent starts stealing agendas, they start bouncing your advanced ice, therefore making your nullifying your advancements basically. Many times this game, I had my advanced ice bounce back to me. However, what priority construction does is to allow you to have a critical mass of advanced ice on the table. Such that you have more double advanced ice on the table than your opponent has leader triggers. At that point, they can no longer disrupt your tricks of light. And being efficient as it is, Prycon allows you to, in the span of 2 clicks, triple advance your ice in fact, and install that ice for no cost at the same time. That is a really good ability, and was the main reason I was able to close out the game at the end by playing a trick of light, because any regular Tenant deck would not have the advancement counters needed to close out the game as quickly as I did without priority construction. It is really a phenomenal bargain at 1 influence, and I was very happy to have drawn, I think, all 3 copies of my Prycon. Some of them were disrupted by Leela, but I still managed to get more advancements through than my opponent bounced my ice. So that's good. Now let's talk Leela. Because I want to compare my opponent's Leela deck with the deck I showcased the last time. My influence was 3 DDoS, which my opponent had as well. We both recognized the sheer power of DDoS. To leverage on DDoS not being a run event, my opponent decided to include 2 Maker's Eye, so you have the DDoS Maker's Eye combo, which you saw this game. It's a very powerful combo, and I think that's a very, very good shout. It is very competitive with Hacktivist in terms of decks influence slots. At the end of the day, though, I decided to go for a lose less strategy with Hacktivist, so that you will lose less against scarcity decks, rather than a win more strategy with Maker's Eye snowballing you out of control. But I must say that a well-timed Maker's Eye can really put the hurt in the court. During the turn where I was trying to push out the Obokata, if my opponent had a Maker's Eye to go through R&D with, if they stole an agenda off it, they would have bounced my Obokata, and that would have been huge. Of course, they would have won the game there as well, but that's a separate point. Yeah. The remaining 2 influence are pretty flexible in terms of slots. My opponent went for Sacrificial Construct, which was interesting. Perhaps that is protection against the likes of Hunter Seeker, which I can understand. I went for Hades Shard. My opponent might have Hades Shard as well, and Peddler for extra speed. It did feel like my opponent's setup was slightly slow this game. During the time in which I scored my first 2 agendas, they only managed to get 1 or 2 gang signs up with no HQ interface. So not very effective in terms of sweeping my hand early when they needed it the most. This is one weakness with Leela's gang sign combos, and one that you can exploit now that I've seen it on the corp's point of view. From the corp's point of view, sorry. Yep, so this is the Tenant deck. I think you should give it a whirl. It's pretty powerful, mostly because it's Jinteki. Jinteki is pretty good right now, huh? Well, hope you enjoyed this deck. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and happy net running. I'll see you another time.